Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Maddie, also known as Tuna, and this is going to be the process video of how I made my Calne Ca cosplay. So twice a year we have this convention happening locally, which is called Unicon, and also both of those times annually it hosts an international competition. For this competition I was sure that I wanted to make something big, and not just literally because I was huge, but I just really wanted to push my limits and see how far I can go. So, since I've been a fan of Vocaloid for a very long time, I've also been familiar with the character of Calne Ca ever since that I joined the fandom. Created by the artist Dano, Calne Ca is actually a skeleton animatronic, which is called Calcium. And when Calcium is cosplaying as Hatsune Miku, then she's called Calne Ca. So the idea of this cosplay first arose in my mind late October last year. It was a few months until the next convention, and I really wanted to join the international competition, which was in January of this year. So this meant that from the first idea of joining the competition until the actual competition, I had around 4 months to finish the project. But one of my main priorities for this cosplay was I wanted to make it as accurate to the real deal as possible. So that meant I would need to be over 2 meters tall, which meant I would need stilts. The first thing I did was gather a lot of reference images. So at first I was only looking for images up on Google, but honestly there weren't that many out there, so I was getting a bit worried because I really wanted to make sure that I have all the details right. And that's when I found the artist of Calne Ca, Dano, and their Pixiv page. And oh my goodness, it was a goldmine of reference material. So that was incredible. There were pages and pages of artworks of Calne Ca, and I was ready to go. That's where I also found out that there's actually so many variations of Calne Ca. Before I only thought that there were two, the one which looks like the base model Hatsune Miku, and then the bacterial contamination one. But no, he's made so many different iterations of her, and I knew at that moment that, okay, I can't just choose the base design anymore. I really wanted to choose another one, because there were just so many cool ones out there, and I thought, if I'm doing this, might as well do something that's not been done before. So eventually I found a design that I really fell in love with, and it was this one. I just love the outfit of this design, the color palette, the hair, and just everything about it just really spoke to me. Unfortunately, this was the only image of this specific design, but I did find two other ones where there was a very similar outfit where I could kind of tell the details of the outfit a bit better, so I also took those into consideration. But the rest of the reference images that I gathered was just so I can see all of the mechanical arm parts and all of the nooks and crannies of it. Once I gathered all the images that I thought I would need, it was time to start making some sketches. This was a very daunting task because even up until now, just her design is so complex. By first glance, there's just so many different parts and thingies that it's just kind of hard to see if you don't have a 3D model. I also took some reference images from some figurines where you could see some of the parts a bit better. But then, looking at all the reference images, I noticed a repeating pattern. I got so excited by that discovery because that meant that I will be able to make it almost perfectly accurate, like with all the details. So what I noticed, the top part of the mechanical arm was the same as the top part of the mechanical leg. Well, pretty much the same. Then the next part was the same as the leg, pretty much. And the smaller part and the spiky bits as well. And those were also the same for the jaw part. So the top of the little leggy for the jaw part was the same as the hand and the leg, and the next and the next as well. So that just made me really excited because now I thought, okay, I'm bound to get it mostly right. And then I started sketching the references and getting all the details down so I can make the blueprints next. I made all the blueprints on Adobe Illustrator and I followed a tutorial from Calne Cosplay. So the whole idea is making the blueprints the actual size that you will need them to be. So I just made the artboards according to my height calculations and moved on with that. The total length of the mechanical legs ended up being
147 centimeters.
how I did the measurements is very chaotic. I didn't follow any tutorial for that. I just used my brain juices and tried to work them at full capacity. Basically, I took the length of my leg from hip to heel, and then I calculated that I would need about 70 centimeter long stilts. I figured out her leg length on the fandom wiki, which had her height on it. Oh, it didn't. Maybe it did. Let me see. Calne Ca's height, it was actually stated as unknown on the wiki page. So I had to improvise. So I looked up Miku's height and then I tried to calculate about how tall the legs would be. For that, I used this image of a body pillow of Calne Ca because there she had her legs stretched straight. Usually she has them bent, so it's harder to actually know the length of her legs. And I don't remember even at this point, but yeah, somehow I came to the conclusion that her legs are 2 meters tall when they are in the bend. No. Yeah, I'm not sure how I did the measurements anymore, so I can't fully say. It was a really confusing and messy process, that's for sure. But basically, I did a lot of crazy maths. Not really, just some very dumb stuff. But in the end, I figured it out. Once I got the approximate length of the legs, then I also figured out that the upper part of the mechanical arm and the leg were approximately to this proportion to the longer parts, and the next parts I just adjusted so that they visually looked about right. The blueprints are down in the description in case you need them. Now, after I finished the blueprints, it was on to printing them out. So I went to a printing shop and you basically had to put the image to poster mode. This is also explained in the Calne cosplay video, so if you're interested in printing out large scale blueprints or images or anything, then I recommend that video. It will also be linked below. Basically, I printed out a bunch of pages, and the next step was to tape them all together and cut out all of the parts. When I had cut down all the parts, I laid them onto the ground because I wanted to see how they would approximately look. And oh my god, they were huge! I was worried that maybe I had miscalculated some of my calculations, but I did take the length of my leg once again and the length of the stilts, and yeah, it was about right. But still, seeing it for the first time all laid out was quite intimidating. Next part was tracing all of these blueprints onto the foam board that I got. This was polystyrene foam board, I believe, from my local hardware store. It's just basically styrofoam, but not with the little balls. It's like fully dense. And this was a great material because it was honestly quite easy to cut. It didn't have jagged edges. It was nice and clean and lightweight and also pretty cheap. Now, one issue I was facing at the time is I was living here at my apartment since I was still going to school at the moment. And I couldn't really make a huge mess in here, so I had to figure out a way on how to cut the foam without it just going everywhere, because if you've ever cut foam before, you know that it creates static and it sticks to your clothes and everything, and it's horrible. So my brother had the bright idea of me just pitching up a tent in the apartment and working in there. And that's what I did. It was silly, but it worked, so that was great. You can cut out the foam board with just regular box cutter, but to be honest, I had so many parts to cut out, it would just take years. Because all of the parts weren't just one thickness. Some of them I had to stack, so I had to cut out multiple parts of one part. And for that, thankfully, my grandpa gave me a whole handsaw. I felt a bit ridiculous using such a heavy-duty power tool for foam, but it worked really great and it didn't take too long in the end, so that was great. The last thing I had to do in my apartment, I glued some of the parts that I had to glue together. I used this foam type glue for this. Basically, it's literally sprayable foam. It hardens as foam, and it worked pretty good. I put that on one side of the foam board, then I put the other one on top, and I stuck some barbecue skewers through so they lay as flat as possible and don't move while it dries. And that was the last thing that I was able to do at the apartment, because next parts would be sanding, and that would be incredibly messy, and it was already a nightmare cleaning up the little tent that I had. So I decided that I would just wait until I get back home, because winter break was right around the corner. Once I got back home, I got to work at my grandfather's workshop, which was incredible. I could just be as messy as I want in there and just do my thing. So these were all the parts that I had to now take and sand down. During this project, there were so many times where I was like, okay, so I'll have to do this, this, and this. It won't take too long, you know? And then every time, all of the parts of the project just took so long, and oh my god. Yeah, spoiler alert, I ended up not having enough time for the whole project. I did somewhat finish it for it to look presentable, but I did need like at least another week for the whole thing, which was unfortunate, but it is what it is. This is what happens when you're a person who does everything last minute, even though it wasn't really last minute. But since this was the first time that I've done anything of such scale, there was a lot of things that I couldn't just predict, and it just took too long. So there were these spiky bits for the mechanical arm that I had to make thinner. I was thinking of sanding them down with some kind of power tool, and thank God my grandfather had a bunch of those as well. In the end, I used the power tool, which you could just attach to the table and sand it down that way. And it honestly worked really great. Now there was this piece that I had to conquer. Basically, there was a lot of cutting and sanding ahead, and it was way more difficult than expected in the end. My grandpa also gave me this knife that I could shave off the bulk width of what I needed, since with the box cutter it was a bit more difficult to do that. Now there came quite a big problem. So you can see all of these parts have these kind of indents in them. And at first I thought I could simply just carve them out with a Dremel, but I've never used a Dremel before. So when I tested out how it even works on the foam, I realized it didn't sand off the foam, it melted the foam. So that was a bit of a problem. And I also realized that it would just take a bajillion years to do it in this manner. I had to come up with a solution, since the Dremel would not handle all of those big pieces, and I would A, not have enough time, and B, the Dremel would probably just overheat and explode, and I did not want that. So I did actually come up with a solution. I decided I would just completely cut out all of those parts which were supposed to be indented, and I would fill them up with thinner layer in the middle. And I knew it couldn't be foam since that would be too flimsy, and I couldn't really cut it out that thin to begin with. But thankfully, I had some old paintings from school at my house, which I painted on this thick cardboard, and it was honestly perfect for what I needed. And it was completely fine sacrificing some of them from this project. Anything for Calne Ca. So yeah, now I just had to cut out all of the holes of the parts which needed those kind of indents. And then I had to cut out all of the according cardboard pieces, which again took way longer than expected since it's a very dense and hard cardboard. It took quite a lot of elbow grease to cut them out. But once I cut those parts out, I aligned them to be in the middle of the foam parts, and then I just hot glue them in there. And in the end, it was actually really good. It looked really nice, and I was happy with the result. The next tedious part was to cut out all of these little circles, and there were so many of them. I don't remember on the top of my head how many there were, but I will put up on the screen how many I ended up making. So for those, I took the circles from the blueprints and I just traced them onto the foam board, and I cut them out and I sanded them. Thankfully, some of them I could just like cut out a circle on the foam board and then take that and cut it in half, and then I'd have 2 circles. So that saved me a bit of time, but still, it took so long. And for these pieces, initially I also thought I would just Dremel out those indents, but it was possible, but honestly, with the Dremel, it was quite difficult to carve into the foam, and it wasn't really as accurate as I'd like. So I just did a similar thing that I did to the big parts, and I just cut out the middle circles, sanded those down a bit so that they're just thinner, and then I glued them back in. So this was the first time that I assembled some of the parts together just to see how they would move and feel. I attached one part to my arm, and the other, they were both stuck together with this PVC pipe, and the end of it was poking out the other side so it could hold it and, you know, move the other part. And that looked pretty good. I was quite excited. But later on, I find out that that was not enough stability just with the PVC pipe, because as I added the other parts at the end, it became very heavy and it was very inconvenient to move it with the PVC pipe. So I was thinking maybe I could add like a rubber band in between both of the parts so it's a bit easier for me to move. But I ended up not having time for that. So at the end, I just connected both of the parts with some fishing line and just moved it like that and not with my arm. The next part was definitely one of the most tedious parts of the whole project, and the one that took the longest, and one that in the end I could have gone without, so that made me very upset, but it's a learning curve, you know, at least I'll know better next time. Basically, me talking with my brother, he suggested some things that would help me just make the whole thing more stable. And so he suggested that I cover the pieces with some bandages and glue and paper and some more glue, so that it's nice, hard, and sturdy. And he said that after it all dries, you'd be able to sand it down. And I hoped that would be the case, but after I covered everything and it dried and I wanted to sand it down, it didn't really have that effect anymore. It wasn't as smooth, and I didn't even have enough time to sand down all the pieces, so I was a bit upset about that since the foam before was way more smooth and nice. So that was unfortunate, but it is what it is. Another layer that I added on the parts was I used this plastic type mesh tape. I think it's used for wall installation or something like that. And I applied that because some of the parts had bigger gaps and I wanted to fill them, and I thought that would be a really good material to do that with. And then I covered it all with painter's tape so that it all just holds together, because the mesh itself wasn't really sticky, it didn't really hold. And then I covered it once again with the paper and glue. Now, once that part was finally done, I was ready to go on to spray painting. Up until this point, there were many moments during the project where I was uncertain if it would even turn out good. You know, seeing the unfinished parts, it looked pretty bad, and I was really worried that it was just gonna look cheap in the end. And now the whole ordeal with the paper and glue, it looking quite rough and messy, I was just kind of bummed down and feeling unsure and sad. But thankfully, once I applied the first layer of spray paint, it all came together so nicely, and for the first time I finally saw the parts how they were actually meant to look like, and it was very exciting seeing it all come together and look actually really nice. Honestly, in the end, the paper and glue combo, it didn't look too rough. Actually gave it kind of this metally forged effect, I think. But definitely if I do something of the sort in the future, then I will just skip the whole bandage and paper and glue part altogether. I will just do probably plain glue in some layers, and I think that would be just fine enough. So during all of this process that I was already working, I did commission my grandfather to make the stilts for me, since I did not trust myself enough to make something stable enough that I could stand on, and I didn't really have time either. But since he's an amazing craftsman, then he would be way better qualified to make that for me anyways, and I'm so thankful that he did. They turned out amazing, and they were very stable, and I didn't have much problem walking in them in the end. Since he made them, I can't comment too much on the process on the whole, but basically the stilts were just made out of wood, metal, and a PVC pipe and some foam. You can see on the sides there were these wooden pieces that would support the outside of my leg. Then the wooden parts on the inside were shorter, since it didn't need to go that far up. Then at the bottom there's this wooden part which would make sure that I could stably walk onto the ground on. It was attached with some metal and screws. And then the part which I was standing on with my foot, it was made out of metal, basically just this metal plate in between the two wooden pieces. You can also see that there's a lot of holes carved into the wood. This was actually so he could make the stilts a bit lighter. Since they were made out of wood, they were quite heavy, and to make them a bit more lighter, then he cut out those circles. But in the end, it wasn't a big problem. They weren't that difficult to walk in weight-wise. And then here you can see a PVC pipe. Basically, it was just this very big PVC pipe that we cut in half, and then in half again, and attach those pieces so that there would be some support on my legs. And on the inside we put some foam so that it's more comfortable, and
yeah, basically, it's not that difficult of a process.
So now came the last night where I could actually work at the workshop before I went back to the city. And I had still quite a lot to do because all of the parts that required sanding I could only do at the workshop since, yeah, I can't really do that at the apartment. It's way too messy. So I had to finish up all of the button parts, which took a really long time. And I also had to actually finally start making the skeleton arm, which I hadn't even thought about until that point. So needless to say, I did not have any time for blueprints or even sketches, so what I did, I was just looked at some references and I made similar shapes, just drew them directly onto the foam, cut them out, sanded them down, and since it's bones and bones are an organic shape, it wasn't actually that bad and it looked pretty good in the end, even though I just free-handed it and made it right there on the spot.
The game wrong or falling behind because it was a virtual world before it was a game, and the points from its
Political history and activity. Do not get me started on mineral properties. Quartz comes in like 6 different compound chains. The deserts will be
Now for the next part, I was finally back at the apartment, and the first thing I did was start working on the wigs. So for her hairstyle, I got 2 separate wigs, since she had these 2 long pigtails and these 2 short pigtails that went on top, and I thought that it wouldn't be enough volume with 1 wig, so I got 2. And I had to dye them, since you can see it has this black to red gradient. I got these red wigs, then I got this synthetic fabric dye from a shop, and it actually also said on the packaging that it can dye synthetic wig fibers, so I was really excited about that and hopeful. And yeah, I went through the whole process and rinsed it out, and I was very worried that it would just rinse out all the dye. I dyed the long wig first, and then I was hoping I could still dye the short wig with the same concoction, but unfortunately it wasn't enough pigment anymore, so I had to get more of the dye. And unfortunately, after I ordered the dye, I got a message from the shop saying that they were out of that specific color, so that was quite bad, but I just got another shade. I think I got some kind of dark gray and hoped that would work. It didn't. It barely dyed the wig, but you know, it's whatever. It'll be fine anyways. Then I made the hairpin, which was actually really simple. I just got this wooden dowel from the hardware store, and then I cut it to the appropriate length, and then I painted it with red acrylics, glued it together with hot glue, and then glued on this tiny chain piece. So that was done. Now for the bow belt looking thing. At first, I really wanted to make it the exact same texture, so smooth the whole way around. I was thinking maybe I could get some rope and cover it with fabrics to make them smooth, but then I thought, you know, actually a rope texture would look pretty good as well. So I bought some rope, and unfortunately I lost it on the way home. I had attached it to the side of my bag and it just somehow fell off, and I didn't find it afterwards. Sadly, I was very upset, but thankfully I had a plan B. I had taken this garden hose from home. Basically, when I just looked at the bow, I was thinking what material could, you know, make the same texture. And when I was at the workshop, there was this garden hose hanging on the wall, and I was like, that could work. That looks very similar. So yeah, I ended up using that. It was quite tricky, honestly. I had to paint it first of all because it was orange, not red, so that took a very long time. And at the same time, I colored the small tubes that would go in the arms and legs since they resembled the wires. But yeah, since the paint was quite sheer, it took quite a while, but in the end, it looked pretty nice. Now I had to figure out a way of how I would connect all of the parts of the belt. First of all, I would have to actually think of how I would be able to open and close it, since I can't make it completely closed off, since I wouldn't be able to put it on. So I got these buttons that you use for like jackets and pants, and unfortunately it wasn't really strong enough, so in the end I had to once again cover it all with fishing line before the performance so that it doesn't fall apart. But it did the job, it was all right. And then the rest of the assembly was I put in some harder type of wire inside all of the bows and the loops so that they would hold. And initially I wanted to connect all of the loops and belt together with hot glue, but that was atrocious. It did not work at all. The parts were way too heavy and the glue just didn't dry at all. So I had to think of something else. And in the end, I just used isolation tape. It looked a bit messy and rough, but I didn't really have another choice. And honestly, it wasn't that bad in the end. I just covered it with red acrylics once again, and it was quite alright. So now came the jaw part, and honestly, that was something that I had to rack my brains most about, because I really couldn't figure out how to make the part that would sit on my face, like from what material. I didn't have any like foam clay, or I don't even know what you would use for that. So since you had to create the illusion that I don't have the lower part of my jaw, because she literally doesn't have the bottom jaw, the spider leg thingies are going out like from inside there, you know. But I thought I'd just make some kind of mask to make the illusion. For this, I looked up some references actually from another cosplayer that I found online, which had cosplayed Calne Ca, and this was honestly the best Calne Ca cosplay I've ever seen. It's so detailed and so well made, and it really helped me kind of understand how to make the jaw part myself, so shout out to that person. And what I ended up using for the black part of the jaw, I was at the fabric store standing in line ready to buy my things, and then I look behind me and I see this big like container of booby pads. Basically, I think it's the ones that you like sew into a shirt or something like that. Basically, yeah, these triangular shaped type foam thingies. And I took them and like put them onto my face. I was like, oh my god, maybe that could work, you know? It creates that kind of edge shape that she has like on the jaw. I thought, you know, maybe that could work. And so yeah, I cut the parts up and then I sewed them together, and I added some elastics that go around my head, and it looked really good, so I was excited about that. The spider leg parts itself I made from the same hard cardboard that I made for the middle parts of the legs and arms, which was honestly very difficult since I said before the cardboard is insanely dense and hard, and since those were very small details that I had to cut out, it was a very, very long and tedious process, and my hand just was about to fall off at the end. But, you know, I did it. It looked quite nice. I sanded them down, then I glued them together, and then I spray painted them in the same black shiny paint that I used for the legs and the arm. Now, there was a problem with how to attach them to the mask. I really didn't have any idea how to do that, so I thought maybe I could sew them on. I tried making holes into the parts itself so I could attach them, and when I was making this, you know, jaw part, it was literally the last hours before the competition. I literally made them so last minute. I didn't even have time to think. I was trying to sew them on at the car ride to the way of the convention. But yeah, I soon realized that is not going to work, so I was just panicking. It was like an hour or less before my prejudging. I still hadn't had makeup on. I had nothing on. I just had to somehow attach those little tentacle looking things onto the mask. So what I ended up using, I literally just hot glued them onto my face. Literally, I had the mask on my face, and I was taking burning hot glue and attaching it to the mask and attaching the tentacle thingies, and then more hot glue. And honestly, do not do that at home. That was probably very dangerous, but I was at my last straw. I had no other options left. And it honestly wouldn't be that bad since I didn't feel the heat of the glue through the mask. The mask covered my face pretty well. But I had gotten these new type of glue sticks because I ran out of my previous ones, and these were stinky as hell. They were horrible, and I had to like put it directly to my nose, so it was these hot and stinky fumes just going up to my nose, and oh my god, it was an awful experience. But magically it actually worked, and I managed to attach all the legs to the face, and I ended up covering all the hot glue bits in black acrylic paint, because thankfully that dries really fast. That was a good thing. But another mistake I made, I didn't glue all of the tiny parts together because they fit quite snugly together, so I was hoping they would just stay. But when I was getting ready to go on stage, parts just kept falling off and I had to push them back in, and it was not a good time. And just for the decorations of the parts, since she had these blue parts and these red parts, I just used blue paper that I colored and glued it on there, and for the red light thingies I just used red gems, and it looked pretty good. For the skirt, sadly I also wasn't able to make this as detailed as I wanted since I didn't have enough time, but I did color on the white lines. I just put on some painter's tape on the skirt and then colored it with white acrylic paint, and it honestly looked pretty good in the end. And then I just cut it down in the middle because, you know, it's not a full skirt, it's kind of open in the front, but I didn't manage to cut out the sides. You can see she has these kind of holes in the skirt on the side. I was quite upset about that since I really liked that little detail, but it is what it is once again, but I think it looked alright in the end. Then for the fabric piece in the front, it was really simple. My mom just gave me some kind of random fabric. It was this kind of stiff type of fabric, and it already had this black to white gradient, so I thought I could incorporate that at first, but I just ended up painting over all of that. I wanted to use fabric dye once again for this, but I didn't have enough time, so I just used watered down acrylics, just black and red acrylic paint, and it worked. It did the job, and it looked quite alright in the end as well. So another thing I really wanted to do is I wanted to make an illusion of some of my limbs missing. For example, as you can see, she has the mechanical arm and the skeleton arm, and since I wanted to make them accurate to scale, I had to mask the arm that was going behind the mechanical arm, because I wanted to make it appear that only the mechanical arm is attached to me, and I had to mask my other arm at like this point so that it looks like the skeleton arm is coming out from there. And so I bought these long black over the elbow gloves, and I bought this bodysuit, this bodice, skin color bodice. I was actually very lucky because it was very similar to my skin tone, so that was nice because that's the effect I was going for. I initially wanted to paint these lines that she has on like her stomach area, since I think those are parts where it's kind of like overlaying and connecting, but I at least wanted to make the illusion of that. But I didn't have time. But yeah, for the arm missing illusion, I just sewed one of the gloves onto the suit completely. I took like an old sleeve from a black t-shirt and like stitched it onto here with the glove, and then the other glove I made this foam type circle thingy that you could like open like this, and once again I used those same buttons that I used for the belt, and those actually worked really well this time, so that was good. So that part went well. For her shirt, actually, that was made by my friend. I remember it was the last night before the convention. She was here to help me with anything I need, and the most humongous thanks to you, Olivia. you were my biggest supporter through all of this, and you really, really helped me making all that I needed at the very last hour. She also made the ribbon for the... Ooh! She also made the ribbon for the wig, and just thank you so much for all of your help. I could not have done it without you, quite literally. So yeah, she made the shirt. She made this from like 2 triangular fabric bits, and I just found some random old shirt that I could rip out fabric from, because I didn't have really time to think about it. I asked her if she could do it, if she could like think of something. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just have to not go naked on stage, you know. And then we attached this this red ribbon on the edge, and I didn't manage to put on the white line as she has on her top, but I had the little red bow at the bottom, and it looked all right in the end. Like, as I said, at least I wasn't walking around naked. For the wig's hairstyle itself, unfortunately, once again, I didn't have enough time. I think it was like the last 2 hours before we had to go to the convention, and I really tried making like the big fluffy pigtails. I think I even got some kind of like foam padding that I was gonna use to give the ponytails volume, but oh my god, it was just a mess. Basically, all of the smaller wig went to the trash. I like cut it up and tried to somehow tease it and form it. It looked like... So I scrapped that completely, and I just went with 2 long ponytails and some really jaggedy, fluffy bangs. But it looked alright, actually, in the end. I attached the ribbons in the hair, and it wasn't too bad. You know, since in some other designs she has only the long pigtails without the fluffy ones, I did really want to make the fluffy ones, but I didn't manage to. But I think it looked pretty nice in the end, anyways. But then 2 of the parts that I did not manage to make at all, unfortunately, and I was really sad about this. Yes, it's very small details, but I really wanted to include them. She had this skull necklace, which I wanted to make, and her little isopod friend on her head. I'm so sad I didn't manage to make that. I really wanted to add that, but it is what it is. This is what happens when you do everything last minute, but not really, because I just overestimated myself. As I said, many parts of this project I thought I would finish way earlier, but everything just took so much longer than expected. Unfortunately, I couldn't really come up with a concept for the performance itself. I really, really wanted to make something cool and interesting and with some kind of storyline and some kind of voice lines. I even tried finding like a Hatsune Miku voice bank online, like a voice generator which I could input some lines on. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that, so I had to think of something else, and in the end, I ended up just taking a song, adding some screams at the beginning of people running away, afraid from me, and just walking around the stage. I was a bit sad about that. I wanted to make something bigger and more epic, but honestly, once I got on stage, I wasn't even able to do anything more. I was barely able to walk and move around the stage, so I think it was good enough. And I also wanted to pick a cool song to go with. I didn't want to take the usual Calne Ca's machine music song. I didn't really feel that it fits her vibe, and personally it's not my music taste. I felt I wanted something like creepy and weird. So I don't really remember how I stumbled upon this exact song, but I'm sure every Vocaloid fan is very aware of the artist Kikuo, and they make incredible Vocaloid music, and I found this song, and I listened to it, and it's so perfect for a Calne Ca performance. I was so happy I found it, and that's what I ended up using in the end as well. Now, one thing about this cosplay and the performance itself, I had not put on all the parts up until the convention even once. So the first time when I assembled everything together was there on the spot. So that made me very worried. At that point, I was honestly not even sure if it would be good enough for a competition, and then it would look awful and unfinished and bad. And I was just getting really depressed about it, and I was not in a good headspace at the moment. I remember my friends helping me out, just trying to attach every part onto me minutes before my performance and before I had to go on. It was extremely stressful and nerve-wracking, but somehow we did manage to put everything on time, thank God, with a lot of fishing tape and elastic bands, but we did it. A humongous shout out to all of my friends that helped me with this project and helped me put everything on and supported me. I could not have done it without them, and I'm so thankful to have had them with me, helping me out there. I quite literally, physically could not have been able to do it without them. I wasn't even sure how I was going to get onto the stage because I ended up having these huge ass legs that were just very wide and big, and the stairs were tiny. I didn't even think it was physically possible to get on there, but thank the lords for the Unicorn crew, because I think in the end it was like 8 or 10 people helping me onto the stage, including all my friends. I just took the tiniest and slowest steps onto the stairs and trying not to break anything. And everyone was just so helpful, and it was just incredible. And I did manage to get onto the stage, and that was the biggest relief I've ever felt. I was so glad I even got on. Unfortunately, while I was trying to get on stage, I did break one part of the cosplay. I broke the mechanical arm, you can see in some pictures. It wasn't too bad, but yeah, quite sad. At least it was attached to my hand, because, as I said, my friends just put a whole kilometer of fishing line around all of the parts just so they stick onto me. Yeah, a lot of things failed to keep connected while I was on stage. Some of the wire tubings fell out, and some of the spider leg jaw parts fell out, and I also realized after the performance that I forgot to put the hairpin in my hair. I was so upset because I really loved the detail. Anyways, but you know, at the end of the day, my biggest achievement honestly was just getting on stage with all of what was happening on me. So I ended up not winning any places or anything, but honestly, as a craftsman, I understand, because yeah, looking up close and with all the details, it wasn't as good and detailed as other costumes, not even close. It was an impressive and big and crazy project, that's for sure, but the quality wasn't there, and that's fine, because I honestly didn't even expect to win anything. My biggest award for me was just hearing the crowd go wild as I appeared on stage. People really loved it. Like, as I was on stage, people were raving about it, people were screaming, and it was insane. As I went off stage, people came up to me and said they think I look amazing and it's the coolest thing ever. And even after the convention, I got DMs from people saying that they loved my performance and loved my cosplay, and that was all I could ask for. Honestly, I'm just so happy that people enjoyed my cosplay and they were excited to see the character, and yeah, that's all I could ask for. It made all of this excruciating process just so worth it. But you know, at the end of the day, I am very happy with how it turned out. I think I did my best, and then people were excited, and it looked cool, and that's all that matters, you know. I am a bit sad that I didn't manage to get like any nice photos outside of the convention. Thankfully, some very amazing photographers got some nice images from me on stage, so at least I have that. I do hope to make like a photo shoot of her in the future maybe, but I do have to fix up some parts. Some parts are broken and need fixing and I need some additions to make. But for now, I am very burnt out from Calne Ca, and I don't think that will be anytime soon where I fully finish every detail. But since I have put so much time and effort into this, I do want to do that one day.
Anyways, just once again, a huge thank you to everybody who helped me with this project, my family, my friends, and myself. You know, I really gave my all for this, and for my first big cosplay craft, I think I did a really good job. So I'm proud of myself. I'm very happy with what I did, and I really think this project made me want to do cosplay seriously. Like, if before I just wanted to kind of like put on some wigs and like some similar looking clothes, but now I'm really determined to make some big and epic projects in the future. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you so much for watching and being here with me on this journey, and see you some other time.
But yeah, now the project was finished and everything was finally done.
And here I'm going to show you some of the clips from the final performance, so enjoy.